Good morning, Bimblers. You join me here at Deansgate Station. And today, we're having a little jaunt down National Cycle Route number 6 towards Bolton to a place called Nob End. Come on, you're better than this. Alright, we're not better than this. But we are going to Nob End. So let's stop messing about and let's bimble. Let's bimble. I'm stood somewhere a little bit naughty. There's some fences around it and I'm probably not supposed to be in here. But I'm only being a nerd. We have the Ord Soul Chord, aka the Castlefield Curve. And basically what it does is it links Manchester Victoria to Manchester Piccadilly, which up until 2017 had never actually been done. Before 2017, if you wanted to get to Newcastle or Leeds via Rochdale from my beloved Warrington, you would have to get off at Piccadilly, walk through the centre of Manchester all the way to Victoria, which isn't really a short walk. It's maybe a nice bimble through the town centre, but if you're in a hurry, if you're an angry commuter, it's unthinkable. So they built this, the Ord Soul Chord, and this should alleviate that, as well as alleviating congestion in the stations. I'd never thought about it before, but apparently it doesn't. As of 2021, the government have put together plans to alleviate that congestion. And their proposed plan means that only one train per hour will actually go over the Ord Soul Chord. So £100 million well spent. A lot of people say it's ugly because of its rusty patina. I am not one of those people. I think it's beautiful. But one bridge that you can't deny is beautiful is this one here. This is George Stephenson's bridge, and this carried the very first passenger railway between Manchester and Liverpool. In fact, it was the first passenger railway in the whole world. George Stephenson basically revolutionised travel in general, transport. Before him, it was pack horses and canal boats. You can more or less go to anywhere in the world and find a passenger railway. Without this very railway line, you wouldn't have Fleetwood. Because Sir Peter Hesker Fleetwood was at the opening of this railway, and that's where he got the idea to invent Fleetwood. And if we didn't have Fleetwood, we wouldn't have my favourite chip shop. And that's a harrowing thought.
On your mind, are you listening? You still won't figure it out. Figure it. With all your thoughts on your mind all the time, oh it's deafening. You still won't figure it out. Figure it. With a simple frame of mind, little time, you can protest all you like. We both know, with goodwill on your side, and a little time, you can have just what you like. We both know things could be easy if you just try. Better off this time. Have it your own way if you like. Things could be easy if you just try. I know you heard every word, every line, but you're missing it. Why won't you figure it out? Figure it. I know I talk really loud. Heard, oh, it's deafening. You still won't figure it out.
Behind me is the River Erwell, and it's the same river that George Stephenson's bridge was crossing over that we visited earlier. It starts its life in Backup, just on the Lancashire side of the Lancashire-Yorkshire border, and it winds its way around the scenic routes of Lancashire for 39 miles. And classically, it would have flowed into the River Mersey in Earlham. And Earlham is called Earlham because it's next to the Erwell. In fact, it used to be called Erwellham. But that stretch of the Erwell became the Manchester Ship Canal. So since 1894, the Erwell's kind of stopped just a bit further down from the Ortal Cord. But it's actually a bit of a stunner. If it wasn't for all the carrier bags stuck in the trees, you'd be forgiven for thinking you were in the Highlands of Scotland. Maybe.
You're missing it. Why won't you figure it out? Figure it. I know I talk really loud. If you heard, oh it's deafening. You still won't figure it out. Figure it. With a simple frame of mind and a little time, you can protest all you like. We both know, with goodwill on your side and a little time, you can have just what you like. Both know it's easy if you just try. Better off this time. Have it your own way if you like. It's easy if you just try. protest all you like. We both know, with goodwill on your side and a little time, you can have just what you like. We both know it's easy if you just try. Better off this time. Have your own way in life. It's easy if you just try. It's easy if you just try. Better off this time. Have your own way in life.
This is Clifton Country Park. And if you're a bit of a nerd about the Industrial Revolution like me, you should probably have a bimble here. Clifton Country Park is actually the site of the old wet earth colliery, but they'd been digging coal here long before they built that colliery. The whole park sits on an old fault line called the Pendleton Fault, and that pushed coal deep from in the earth's crust up to the surface. And for hundreds of years people were just picking up coal off the ground. It was that easy to find. And then they'd dig a bit of a hole and there'd be some more coal. And years go by and they have to get more elaborate. And they used to dig something called bell pits, which is where you just dug a big hole and then dug your way out. And you'd dig as far as you could before you thought the whole thing would collapse on top of you. The owner of the land, Mr. John Heathcote, decided that a more elaborate plan needed to be put together to get all that coal out of the ground. And he hired a man called Jacob Fletcher, who was actually only 18, but he was a right clever clogs. And Jacob Fletcher actually managed to dig an 80-metre deep shaft. But there was a problem. With the shaft being so close to the River Erwell, and so close to Manchester, which is a very rainy place, it used to fill up with water. And it became very dangerous to dig the coal out. The men would have to dig the coal out underwater. And Mr. Heathcote asked Mr. Fletcher to sort out the problem. And they tried all kinds of things. Men with buckets, a horse gin, that's a horse-powered engine, winding ropes with buckets on, all the way up to the top. But that didn't work. And the water got so bad that in 1750, they had to close the mine. And it was at that point that Mr. Heathcote remembered he had a relative called James Brindley, and after speaking to him at a wedding, he set James Brindley the task of getting the water out of the mine. And because James Brindley was a very, very clever man, the cleverest of the clogs, he used the power of the water from the River Erwell to pump the water out of the mine. He built a weir in the River Erwell to build up a head of water, and sent that head of water up the hill up to the mine, and used it to operate what's called a nodding donkey, which would pump the water out of the mine, release it out into a stream and back into the River Erwell. And James Brindley's pump was so successful that in 1752 the mine reopened. But Mr. Jacob Fletcher didn't slink off and be defeated. He still worked at the mine. And he actually built a canal that linked the mine to the Manchester, Bury and Bolton Canal. And that meant that the coal that they dug out could get to Manchester, Bury and Bolton. Now you may think that those two engineers may be my favourite engineers that ever did anything here at Clifton Country Park. Jacob Fletcher or James Brindley. It's a toss-up between the two. But my favourite engineer did something much more miraculous than that. This lake behind me wasn't here when it was the wet earth colliery. This was dug as a gravel pit for the nearby M60 motorway. And after they'd finished the motorway, they let the gravel pit fill up with rainwater and made this whole area into a country park. And in the middle of the gravel pit, they put a small island for all the ducks and wildlife to set up camp on, away from us walking round it. But after it had filled up with water, they found that the sides of the island were too steep for the ducks to get up there. So they enlisted an engineer, and he brought his labourer Donald and 2 shovels, and they were ferried to the island in the middle, and Fred Dibner and Donald, his labourer, flattened off the island so that the ducks could get onto it. And from then on, the island in the middle has been called Dibner's Island. And if you don't believe me, you can see it in episode 4 of Fred. You actually see them digging the island, and you can see what Clifton Country Park looked like before all these trees grew. Did you like that?
You can protest all you like. We both know with goodwill on your side and a little time, you can have just what you like. We both know it's easy if you just try. Better off this time. Have it your own way you like. It's easy if you just try. Easy if you just try.
You join me here at St Xavier Church in Ringley. And the original church that was built here was built in 1625. But that's not it. The Victorians came along and they decided they wanted a new church. So in 1826, they knocked the old church down and all they left was this clock tower, which is now Grade 2 listed, so that's safe. And the new church that was built was designed by Charles Barry. Charles Barry is famous for building the Houses of Parliament, you know, Big Ben, the clock tower there. And he designed and built them a church. So you might get a bit excited. Ringley has a church that's designed by the same person who designed the Houses of Parliament. Well, that's not the church. 30 years after they built that church, they knocked that one down and built another one. So who designed this church? Well, that would be Messrs Austin and Paley. And we've heard the name Paley before. Edward Graham Paley. He's the man that designed and tarted up St Peter's Church in Heysham. And he also did some work to St Peter's Church in Lancaster, and that became Lancaster Cathedral. When he first went into architecture, he went into partnership with an Edmund Sharp, and they built several churches, along with Hornby Castle near Lancaster. But when Mr Sharp retired, he went into partnership with Hubert Austin. And for my Warrington viewers, you may know a church that they designed in Warrington, in Walton, and another church that they revamped in Daresbury. They also had offices at Walton Gardens. So it's a small world.
Have it your own way you like. It's easy, just try.
Bimblers, we reach Nob End, and so far it's been full of knob ends. I seen 2 lads setting fire to some clothes. There was a fella about my age with no top on, drinking lager on this bridge. I do hope they weren't setting fire to his top. And the same 2 lads ran across the top of this bridge, which was absolutely terrifying to watch. And no matter where I do a piece to camera, a woman with a tiny dog will come and have a telephone conversation next to me. I'm really going through it for you. So this is Nob End, and it sits at the confluence between the River Erwell and the River Erwell, and it's in a part of Bolton called Little Lever. In Victorian times, they used to use it as a chemical waste dump for all the alkali factories. And apparently Nob End used to smell of egg, which is very unfortunate for somewhere called Nob End. But oddly, all that chemical waste has had an odd effect. Most of the plant life in Lancashire is plant life you would find in a sandstone bed. We spoke about the sandstone in Cheshire. It's more or less the same in this part of Lancashire. But because of all that chemical waste, weathering down to calcium carbonate, most of the plant life here in Nob End is the same plant life you would have in Yorkshire, where they have a limestone bedrock. And that makes Nob End a place of scientific interest. There's 4 bridges in Nob End, a concrete service bridge with a hole in the fence. And Martin Zero was very disparaging about it in his video about Nob End. You should go and subscribe to Martin Zero if you like the kind of thing that I like. He goes all around Manchester and the surrounding areas, going in tunnels and things. And if he hadn't have done a video about Nob End, I wouldn't have known it existed. I'm not sure whether that's good or bad right now. Next to the concrete service bridge, we've already been over it once on our Bimble, is Presteley Aqueduct. And that takes the Manchester, Bury and Bolton Canal over the River Erwell. It was built in 1793 and the canal was finished in 1808. The Manchester, Bury and Bolton Canal connects Salford near Manchester to Bury via Bolton. And what it did was give the wet earth colliery access to the coal markets of Manchester and gave some competition to all those coal mines along the Bridgewater Canal in Wigan, Goulburn and Leigh. It cost £127,000 to build the canal, which is about 10 million in today's money. And by the 1930s it was finished with. They weren't taking coal down the canals anymore. And that canal that was built by Jacob Fletcher had burst its banks several times. And it was just decided to let it run into the River Erwell. On top of that, the Manchester, Bury and Bolton Canal burst its banks. And when the Second World War came around, they decided to fill in sections of it. That was because of the bombing raids. Hitler had instructed his Luftwaffe to follow all the canals in the north of England, because the canals would lead into the cities, which would lead to the factories. On the other side of this concrete service bridge is a pack horse bridge from the 1700s, and that's just newly been refurbished, and it was built to replace a medieval bridge that was in exactly the same place. But they aren't the most interesting bridges here. The most interesting bridge is the Meccano Bridge. It replaced a bridge that was designed to get boaters from one side of a lock to the other. And when the canal fell into disrepair, so did the bridge. The canal dried up and people just started walking on the bottom of the canal. But in 2012, a man called Liam Curtin was given the task of designing a bridge. And because he grew up in Bolton, he decided that the bridge would have to be something from his childhood. And he used to play with Meccano. So the bridge is actually based on real Meccano parts. There's actually only a few custom parts to the bridge. They accompany the Meccano Bridge with a Meccano picnic bench and a normal bench made exactly like Meccano. It's all very jolly at Nob End.